Inspiration combats desperation. It soothes the incoherent brain and heals the body. I inspire myself every day by paying attention to the ideas that cross my mind. I grab the most appealing one and let it fly like a kite in the blue sky, with me hanging from its tail. I was born here, in Buenos Aires, Argentina. As I was growing up, I experienced many changes in the way the country was led. In the 60s and 70s, not one, but 3 democratic governments were overthrown in military coups. This was my high school. When I was 14, our English teacher rushed into the classroom and with panic in her voice, instructed us to leave immediately. There was a bomb planted by a terrorist group. I never ran so quickly in my life. Fortunately, the bomb was found and defused before anyone was injured. Significant social and political unrest was spreading throughout the country. The beloved leader at the time, Juan Domingo Perón, had recently died. Opposition to those in charge, riots, inflation, and corruption made me feel that there was always some kind of drama going on. Despite this turmoil, it never ceased to amaze me that no matter what was happening in the political scene, the whole country gets wrapped in a state of total euphoria when it came to soccer. Those were moments of solace and unity, shared by everyone. Time continued to pass, and I became a scientist. During my formative years, I was always interested to understand why people do the things they do. It is possible that my curiosity was fueled by my exposure to these extreme political and economic conditions. In my 20s, as inflation rose to a staggering 3,000% a year, I started to look for new horizons. Destiny took me to the land of kangaroos, Australia. I was offered a position in Tasmania as the general manager of a German company, a random opportunity that I embraced with passion. I was young and inexperienced, but somehow I made it work. While I had the technical expertise and lots of drive, I knew nothing about leading a team or a company. That was a pivotal moment for me. I realized I had to learn more about leadership. From that moment onwards, I became so passionate about this topic that I would end up working in the field of leadership development for the next 20 years. One of the many things I've discovered on this journey is that no matter where I am in the world, most people seem to agree on the attributes they would like to see their leader display, whether it is someone they report to at work or a political figure. We've come a long way since the Industrial Revolution. We've seen great leaders come and go. We've also seen a fair amount of questionable individuals in positions of leadership who don't necessarily know what to do or how to act once they get there. Learning from the past is important, but we also need to imagine the future. A future where great leadership is understood, embraced, and cultivated at all levels. That's why I made this documentary, to bring home the concept of leadership to everyone. And so I set forth. I traveled the globe to talk to different people to find out what they learned throughout their own leadership journeys. I also spoke to experts who shared with me invaluable strategies that we can all use to foster the leadership abilities we carry within us. I believe that if we apply these strategies to our lives and share them with our teams, friends, and families, the world would certainly be a better place.
I think that leadership is something that is extremely important at all levels of an organisation and for everybody in life, actually. We all have our own personal journey of contribution, and we all have leadership roles in different aspects of our lives.
And leadership is about, of course, about people, about a team, about energy, but about challenging the status quo, the present moment, and finding new opportunities in a global economy, in a global world.
Leadership means not just acting for your own individual interests, but to be aware of your biases, your value base, and who you're accountable to.
I think every leader every day walks a fine line between being strong and tough and looking, very commanding and exercising authority, and the other side of leadership, which is compassion and empathy and trying to understand what it is, the effects that your decisions and actions are having on the people who rely on you. And that is a very fine line you walk every day.
The last live leader that truly motivated or inspired me was Nelson Mandela. And he stood for something that went beyond just a small cycle in somebody's life. It made lasting difference. Now I know we don't need necessarily a Nelson Mandela in every country or in every company, but the idea that you need a visionary, I feel, is now lacking. There's too much competition and not enough, there's too much myopia.
I would like to work for a leader that respects me, and as he respects me as a person, I can respect him too.
Do I consider myself a leader? I guess the answer has to be yes, but I come from a culture and now live in a culture where calling yourself a leader is not really done, so I always struggle to label myself that way.
I traveled to Cambodia to interview Troy Roberts, who leads a not-for-profit organization out of Phnom Penh. Along with his wife Nicole, volunteers from around the world, and a team of locals, he's doing the impossible. Enduring very tough conditions and with very few resources, Troy and his team are building houses for impoverished families. This project provides not only a roof over their heads, but an education for the children. The main goal is to keep the children close to their parents and away from sex trafficking and slavery. An estimated 3 million people, including leaders, intellectuals, and artists, were executed in Cambodia during the Khmer Rouge regime between 1975 and 1979. Troy and others like him are helping the country recover from this lost generation and step into the modern era. This work requires grit, determination, self-sacrifice, but above all, it requires leadership. I asked Troy what leadership attributes he needed to learn to do what he's doing.
One of the main leadership aspects that I've had to learn is how to develop vision and continue to develop vision and continue to tell that story of where we're going in a really clear way. We've got to communicate well, and we've got to, know how to have the hard conversations, know how to say it like it is, know how to be direct, know how to sit down with people and do it with the right tone of voice and the right, there's still love in the room, we still love you, but we've got to say this to lead this organisation forward, and just expressing and inspiring our team. We've definitely had to learn about how do you go about inspiring your team, how do you go about lifting people up when they're down, and just being aware of who's where, when. Because some days people are up, sometimes they're down, and we've got to learn how to get around them and encourage others to get around them too. I think one of the other attributes as a leader that we've had to learn is how to let it go and how to empower people around us to step up. It started with Nick and I here in Cambodia, and that was great, and we were doing nearly every job in the organisation, but if we were to grow, we had to learn how to let things go and let other people and trust other people, even young people with maybe little experience, from a worldly perspective, but we had to learn to take it, say, an 18-year-old and trust them with something big and help them to grow through that. So growing other people was a huge thing. We've always, from day one, been working with a lot of volunteers. People are coming over, giving their money and their time to work with us on our team. And one of the things we said from the start is we've got to build a culture of family within our organisation where everyone belongs, no matter who you are. And that's something we really believe from Raw Impact anyway. Like, if we're going to do this non-profit organisation, we want it to be just a framework where anyone can come and get involved, regardless of, who you are.
I've visited many companies around the world, and the same phenomena exist. It's universal to all of them. When companies are under stress, when they're being challenged, when they're competing and they think that they're losing their position, tension arises in companies at a very high level. And we see it when people are short with each other, they judge each other, they blame each other for things that are going wrong. And so that's a universal in every place that I've been in the world. The challenge is for leaders to understand that their distress, their anger, their fear, their frustration is passed into an organization. And it's not just the words, it's not just a moment where they say, oh, I'm so upset, and let it go. That people are connected to these big growth aspirations, and they feel the pressure that the boss brings into an environment. It activates cortisol in the brain. That's the first thing that we see that causes issues and challenges for an organization to achieve those aspiring goals, because cortisol has the ability to close down, literally close down the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that we need for uncertainty that's going on in the world, and strategies and foresight and thinking out of the box and so forth, and even empathy. And so leaders need to understand that chemical shift, that moment where they're interacting and creating fear in others, is exactly the opposite of what they need to produce the results that they need to be successful as an organization. What we've spent years studying is the different practices and the different things that leaders can do in order to change the environment, the feel of an environment. Even though we don't see it, leaders need to be aware that people feel that. And so creating awareness is number one for leaders in understanding how important their interaction dynamics are with their people. Number one, their awareness is important. Number two, it's that there is a thing called cortisol, and that there are other neurochemistries that they need to understand that are what produce innovation and unusual thinking and partnering and so forth. And that's more of the oxytocin, which is what brings people together. Oxytocin, according to Bruce McEwen at Rockefeller University, who is one of the people that has helped inform this work, he says that it's probably the most frequently produced neurotransmitter in the human body, but we have to have the right conditions for it. And when we do, and this is my interpretation of his work and the work that I'm doing, when we do that, and we create environments where people feel connected even in the face of difficult situations, then we produce a whole new activated network in the body that has been suppressed over evolution. And that is the ability to connect and almost read minds of others when we're feeling open to them. Releasing oxytocin is something that both men and women can do. At one time was thought it was just something that women do when they're nursing their babies. And now we know that it's very much a part of the male-centric thinking. And it takes away the idea that there's a maleness and a femaleness. There's a humanness that gets activated when oxytocin is running fluidly between human beings.
What are the consequences of bad leadership from your perspective?
I think one of the consequences of bad leadership is that you lose great people. You know, you lead badly, people won't stick around. If you don't have a solid vision or you're not communicating well with people, it's going to fall apart at the people stage. And I think that's one of the, the things that I see as the biggest disasters for any organisation, because the people are their greatest asset. And that's certainly the case for us. I think one thing we can learn is when you take out all the leaders, it takes a long time for a country to get up and going. And we've seen that. Only in the last 5 to 10 years has Cambodia started to, we value leadership, we need leaders. We're starting to turn that around a bit in this country now. But I think, one thing we can learn is just placing a huge importance on building new leaders from the ground up. And that's something we really hold dear at Raw. Like we can't afford all these expert professional leaders that might have 50 years experience. So we have to build leaders from 16-year-olds, high school kids that are coming up and now learning in our media team. And we have to build leaders where they're at. They might not have all the experience or all the degrees, but that doesn't mean they can't be great leaders.
After leaving Cambodia, I kept wondering if the challenges that Troy has to face from a leadership point of view are similar to those that a corporate leader encounters. To answer this question, I traveled to Melbourne to interview the head of a digital enterprise, someone who manages a large and diverse group of people in multiple locations.
If I think about my leadership journey, looking back, I wasn't even a manager to start with. I was just running on pure instinct, heavily biased, using emotion and other, really poor mindsets that drove to poor behaviors. I'm surprised anybody followed me at all in those early days. So, I have a mental model in my head about how I was, and I imagine, walking into a garden full of statues of who I was, and whether it was a statue of me growing up and having to be tough because of my upbringing or because I was smart, and those, I propagated those things. I could work tougher than anybody. I could outsmart. I would work all hours of the day and night. I would play hard and work hard, and people would see that and they would propagate that view. I was promoted based on those actions. And therefore that just built up that false sense of myself. And so those things really held me back to become a real effective leader, because I don't need to be tough all the time. I don't need to solve all the time. What I need to do is try to help the people around me, get a better sense of what's happening in themselves, in the world, and what challenges we're trying to face. So those very things, those very fibers of who I thought I was actually holding me back from who I needed to be. And so it's still a challenge today. If you're tired or you're coming off a plane and you revert back to those kind of default thinking styles or default behaviors, they're always there. So constantly thinking about where my mind is at. What am I thinking about? What am I feeling? Trying to stay as much as I can in two minds about a certain subject. If I can look at a problem and have two parts of my mind looking at the problem from opposing views, makes someone very anxious. It makes me very anxious even to be in that space. But the longer I can control that anxiousness and just let my mind play with those ideas, the much better off I am. Meanwhile, while I'm thinking and not talking and not solving, my team has probably sorted it out for themselves and they didn't need me at all, which is kind of the point.
It's so important for a leader to know who they are so that they can understand how they impact the people that they serve. And I think one of the things that's really important is for leaders to understand that they serve. Everybody serves somebody. So when you have a leader that is not self-aware, you have a recipe for disaster because they've no idea how their mood, their direction, their communication influences the people that are actually all around them and the stakeholders that they need to be able to ensure that they get the right result for themselves and the organisation that they serve. People leave their leader. They don't leave their company.
One of the insights I had, and it's almost laughable now, is feedback from my team that I always thought myself as a very approachable, easygoing person. You know, you can come up and talk to me anytime and you can tell me things. And in fact, that wasn't the case. You know, in fact, most of the people who work for me found me very unapproachable. And I've worked all over the world in different cultures, so I've done a lot to try to calm that down. But it was just so funny that it was such a bipolar view. And in fact, a funny story, these are where these insights, these kind of vertical learning things never leave you. The following week, I was walking down the hall, and at that time I was running a very large business, 2,000 people. We were challenged at that time from a revenue perspective, and I was cutting costs. Anyway, I was walking down the hall, and some young lady was essentially had herself pinned up against the wall as flat as she could as I walked by, as if, you know, she was trying to get out of my way. If there was a closet she could jump into, she would have. Now, the week before, I probably wouldn't have picked that up. I was probably just going down the hall, you know, thinking about what I had to do. But that insight of me going, well, maybe I'm not approachable, really stuck with me. And that just, her doing that, and no fault of hers, it was something I was doing to her, really stuck out for me. And so I stopped. And we had a talk and I had a chat and, you know, and opened myself up to being, you know, too often you look at leaders as a person in a suit and a person in an office. We're still humans, we're still people. We have hopes and dreams and fears and vulnerable like everybody else. And I think I look to do more of that. And perhaps over time, people can see me as being a bit more approachable. As I've gone through this journey of trying to be a better leader, and it's still an ongoing process, there's many things I had to learn about myself. I had to really reassess, you know, were those real things that helped me and were they effective in me being a leader? In fact, there was parts of what I believed in that I was very proud of being that were making me a poor leader. So really understanding fundamentally what I believed, what my mindset was. And once I figured that part out, then that allowed me to open up, you know, the possibilities of thinking about something much differently. So now it's about, you know, how do I feed that mindset? You know, if I'm eating well, if I'm sleeping, if I can slow my thinking to the point where I can listen, I can sense, I can sensitize, you know, that just constant experimentation of my life and my health, both mentally and physically, and how that, you know, eventuates itself with my leadership style. Still doing that, but it's a constant, you know, challenge for us as leaders, or for me. Yeah, I'm still learning.
I've left my meeting with Brad thinking that no matter the role we play in life, the best leaders seem to be able to establish great connections with people, cultivate an atmosphere of trust, and create a sense of belonging. Helping others grow as leaders, just like Troy is doing with his young team in Cambodia, is also a crucial aspect that leaders must consider. But most importantly, as Brad described very well, developing our leadership starts with knowing ourselves and understanding the impact we have on others, so we can change what doesn't work. While reflecting on these leadership stories, I had the strong feeling that there was something else. There was something missing. I wonder what characteristics the most accomplished leaders possess that make them effective, admired, and respected. The answer literally fell into my lap the day I received a research paper which examined the differences between top and average leaders and how these differences relate to the performance of their brains. Intrigued by these findings, I traveled to the other side of the planet to meet the researcher. I am in Norway, a beautiful country where every year since 1901, someone gets awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. But I haven't come all this way to attend the Nobel Peace Prize ceremony. I have come to meet a unique individual, a researcher and management professor at Oslo University, Dr. Harald Harun. Dr. Harun has been studying what makes leaders world-class leaders. Let's see what he has found out.
We started with the theory, we call it the unified theory of performance, that how much you have developed of your mind and your brain, refined, you could say, the mind and brain, is the fundamental ingredient in higher performance. And to test this theory, we have studied world-class performers in music, management, and sports. And we have compared these world-class performers with average performing controls to see if there was a fundamental difference in the level of mind-brain development. And what we found is that the world-class performers, they mobilize the brain when they should mobilize the brain, and relax the brain when they should relax the brain. Whereas the average performers often did the opposite. They mobilized the brain when they should have relaxed, and they relaxed the brain when they should have mobilized. So they were basically throwing a lot of mental energy out of the window. I think what is going to happen is a shift, a major shift in the way we educate our leaders. So far, the emphasis is being on having certain kind of knowledge or having certain kind of resources, or doing, communicating or making a strategy or making a decision. I think the emphasis will shift from having and doing to being. The important thing is who you are, how your brain works, how much happiness you have, how much empathy you have, how good ethics you have, are you a moral person? Because I think with these qualities, this is what we call higher mind-brain development, then spontaneously you will be more successful as a leader. Is everybody a potential leader? I think yes, in the sense that the most important leadership role is to be happy, to lead a happy life, and to have a lot of love and creativity and empathy and high moral. I think that is the potential in everybody, to lead a happy life.
It was here in Oslo when I realized that the brain is the common denominator in everything that I was seeking an answer for. If effective leadership is about how we relate to people, then the brain is the place to look. I thought about the decisions, impulses, and behaviors of people in positions of leadership and what happens if their brains are not working well. But most importantly, I was curious to find out what we can do about it. Dr. Harun explained to me that we don't have to be Olympians to have a good brain, and that it is possible for common people to learn the techniques to optimize brain function and consequently our leadership abilities. I also kept pondering how I could learn to just be. During our interview, Dr. Haroon insisted I visit his research partner, Dr. Fred Travis, at the Maharishi University of Management in Iowa. It is fair to say that no one in the world knows more about the relationship between brain waves and meditation, and in particular transcendental meditation, than Dr. Travis. A few years ago, I had my brain scanned with a SPECT machine at the Amen Clinic. Now, the idea of looking into my brain for a second time with an EEG machine, which measures brainwave patterns, was an exciting prospect. Being a guinea pig and getting to know my brain is certainly one of the most interesting things I've ever done. Life, however, had other plans for me. As I was organizing my trip to America, the unexpected happened. I fell down the stairs and broke both of my ankles. I ended up in hospital and had surgery the next day. It was a bit of a setback, but it turned into an unexpected golden moment. I realized that I had to accept what had happened, and perhaps I could use this opportunity to learn how to be. Despite my newly found optimism, when the doctor said I would be in the hospital for 2 full months, my fears started to creep in. My mind began to come up with all sorts of scenarios, questions, and thoughts, most of them quite negative. That's when my friend Alison came to visit. To help me deal with this sudden despair, she shared her personal story with me. Her words gave me a new perspective on how to lead through fear, and I made peace with my new situation. Talking with Alison reminded me that fears come in many shapes and forms. Fear can restrict our leadership potential. It can even paralyze us unless we learn how to become resilient and push through.
When I think about my early childhood relative to my school years, I think about fear. I was afraid of school. I was very afraid of being punished or looked at, criticized. When I was 3 years old, we moved to England, and my sister and I were enrolled in a small private school. It was at this time that my life took a bit of a journey, because I was sexually and physically abused by my headmistress of the school. I first had to face that it actually happened. I was in a state of denial and disbelief for a long time, and it was a very painful time. Once I accepted the fact that this had happened, despite my anger and denial and my frustration, at the injustice of this, I knew that the only way to deal with this was to face it head on and to actually move through it. When I was 18, I went to hotel management school, and I was passionate about hospitality. I was passionate about serving people, and I decided that this was the career I wanted. In my first year of hotel management school, one of my classmates told me that I was so shy and so reserved that he thought that I wouldn't make it in the industry. At that point, I was determined to prove him wrong. I decided that, you know, this is the industry that I'd chosen. I knew I was going to be good at it, and no matter what, I was going to prove him wrong. So I started at that stage putting myself into situations that were incredibly frightening for me and isolating at times. I pushed myself to challenge myself to be really, really strong and courageous. I took chances that I normally wouldn't take. I applied for transfers overseas. I went overseas on my own. So I continually put myself into incredibly challenging situations to prove my resilience, to prove that I could be self-sufficient and independent and strong. When fear rose for me as a leader, I found myself doing things that were incredibly controlling. I felt like I needed to control everybody and everything in my environment. I set up unrealistically high standards for myself, and I know that I was compensating for what I felt like were my own feelings of inadequacy. So I personally set up really high standards. I worked incredibly long hours. It became my addiction. I thought that the more I threw myself into leadership, the better leader I would be. Not realizing that what I was doing is just creating another issue for myself, which was the addictiveness of it. And I wasn't really mentoring people. I wasn't being the leader that I wanted to be. What I was doing was actually controlling people and wanting them to be a certain way, as opposed to allowing them to be empowered and show up as themselves. When I finally realized that a lot of the way I was leading people was driven by fear, it was the turning point when I could turn that around and do something differently.
Fear can be a wonderful thing when we're in life-threatening situations. For most of us, though, fear often holds us back. And sometimes, from a brain perspective, not only do we have that threat response, it also generates a lot of then negative thoughts that we're almost encouraging ourselves then not to move forward. So one of the things we know again from positive psychology is if we can use our positive emotions and leverage them, we can overcome these elements of fear. And it's not as easy as going, oh, well, I don't feel it anymore, I'm no longer anxious. But can we use things such as positivity, curiosity, savoring, things like expanding and gratitude that will help us overcome this fear? Considering ourselves excited by the possibilities rather than anxious over what could happen. Now, there's a lot of training sometimes we need to do there to rewire the brain over those fearful thoughts, and yet we know that that's possible.
I've done a lot of work in meditation and mindfulness to calm my mind, to calm this overactive and anxious part of myself that sometimes gets triggered. So, and what I've learned is that facing what I'm most afraid of, if I face it, if I deal with it, if I talk about it, if I explore it, I can generally move through it.
Once I was out of the hospital, I continued my quest. I wanted to explore the inner workings of the brain in every possible way. What if people could see how well their brains are working or not working? Would they change anything? I arranged to meet several brain experts in various locations to get answers to my questions. I started by visiting Brooke, an executive coach in San Francisco. I knew she'd also decided to look inside her brain. The results of her scans had impacted her so much that she embarked on the journey of changing some of her lifestyle habits.
I have always led a very type A, high-powered, fast-paced life. And so I graduated college, I went off to work, I started a new job in a new city. I did all the things that you're supposed to do, right? So I met my husband, we married, we bought a house, we grew our professions. And while those were all important steps that were very important in my growth, I did them to some extent on autopilot, really like creating this life that I wanted and this persona and this external sense of me. And that worked for me for a very long time until it wasn't working for me. Nice and perfect looking on the outside, but what was really going on for me wasn't the same picture. Flash forward 10 years to, I think it was 2015, and I found myself up in front of a group one day facilitating a workshop that I had delivered many times, but it was the first time where I felt like, I'm going through the motions here. do I even know what I just said? Really, I felt like I almost had an out-of-body experience. Like, I'm just doing this. This is part of what I do, but who am I really? And what am I here to do? So that's when I thought, okay, well, maybe I really need to explore this more deeply, pay attention, really, peel off some of the layers here to understand and go more deeply. And I decided to go have my brain scanned. And it was when I got my results back from my brain scan that kind of stopped me in my tracks. So my intuition that I had been finally paying attention to after all these years proved to be right. I was in big trouble. So I learned more about what my scans were showing, but essentially, to simplify it, my scans were showing a much older woman than I am chronologically in my body. But even more importantly, there were implications to my short-term and long-term memory and to my overall health. So that's when I realized it's not just about the public persona that I'm curating and how do I practice what I preach, but it really is to peel away the layers and go back in and do the work. And from there, I'll have something to talk about that's real and authentic.
It's critical leaders understand the role of their brain in optimal performance. A lot of people understand that from an abstract or conceptual standpoint, but they never really break it down in terms of practicality. So how do you assess the health of your brain, and then what do you do to take it to the next level of performance? One of the exciting things I've seen when leaders have the ability to see their brain on a brain scan is they catch an excitement about doing whatever is necessary to take their brain health to the next level. And as a result is they start walking their talk, right? So they start, they don't just talk a good game, or they actually do what they tell their coaching clients to do. So they start making those changes in nutrition, sleep, stress management, exercise, et cetera, that really make a big difference.
One of the most important things I changed as a result of the scan was it forced me to look at how much I was drinking. And while I thought my drinking habits with our friends on a weekend were normal, and I attributed to how I felt the next day based on my age and, oh, I'm just getting old, what I found is that I really needed to change those habits and change how much I consumed. So I completely cut alcohol out of my life, and it was one of the things that I saw immediate benefit from. That alone, I felt like a completely different person. I think I got my scans on a Wednesday or a Thursday, and by the following Monday, I was already feeling more optimistic and more positive just by changing my diet, moving more, getting into my own self and spending some time meditating. It was fast. When you think about meditation, for instance, we know that people are more effective and more productive and more satisfied when they meditate. And a lot of us are doing it, but we're not talking about it at work. And I have clients that say to me, I don't have time to meditate. The really effective people are running around, they're not meditating. And I ask them, well, how do you know? Maybe they're effective because they are meditating and taking the time out to reflect. So I think the constant 24/7 cycle won't go away, but it's how leaders interact with that cycle and how they take time to recharge and re-energize themselves to come up with the next big idea and stay on the cutting edge of that while still staying healthy. Bottom line, no one's going to do it for you. You have to do it for yourself.
After speaking with all the people I had met with, the logical next step was to explore the strategies we can use to become more compassionate human beings and also more effective in what we do. Besides going deeper into the practice of meditation, I learned about the sleep, the nervous system, and the connection between the gut and the brain. I was also taught about the importance of tapping into the power of our hearts and the mindsets we need to develop to adapt to this changing world.
The science of meditation, which we've been investigating now for 40 years, physiologically, psychologically, and health-wise, shows that those leaders who practice meditation, one of the most widely studied is transcendental meditation. Studies have shown that leaders who practice transcendental meditation take this deep rest for 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the evening, have even higher levels of brain functioning, higher levels of physical functioning, live longer, and do better overall, and do better with their teammates as well.
Yeah, so is any meditation better than none? I think so. Because what meditations are doing is exploring inner subjectivity. Our education system says, look outside. What are the objects outside? Why do objects outside move? They never stop and ask you, how are you feeling? We want to be able, when there's a question, to just settle into silence, let the creative idea come up, and then go for it. You don't want to be so caught up in the problem space that you can't think of a solution. And this is the importance of doing other things besides the work. This is the importance of taking time for rest, taking time for food. This is the importance of taking time for yoga for the body. This is the time for taking time for meditation for the mind and body. What you're doing is you're investing your time, 20 minutes in the morning, so you're much more productive during the day. And something else which is so important is you're happier. Let us consider the value of happiness, enjoying yourself, and that means enjoying your family, that means enjoying your friends, that means enjoying being on earth. And so this is what transcending is going to give to you. It's going to sharpen the mind, you're going to be clearer, you're going to be more productive, but you're also going to be happier.
I was introduced to meditation, I'll say meditation in the broader sense, a little bit broader than mindfulness. So I was introduced to meditation by my parents who came from India and took me to India when I was about 14 or 15, where I learned the Gayatri Mantra, which is a Hindu meditation. I didn't really get it, I wasn't into it. I grew up here in Canada. I didn't understand, though I do remember doing it a little bit when I was waiting for my high school exams. So I think some part of me knew that it was helping me calm down and get focused. I'm a musician as well, and as I started to play music, I started to explore this strange subjective experience when I would play with my bandmates, that I would experience this state of flow or psychological, like in the zoneness of playing music. And I started to explore musical forms of meditation, one in particular named Nada Yoga, where you try to listen to the sound of nothing. And that started to lead me into exploring mindfulness in a more academic perspective as I was studying psychology and neuroscience at the time. And that kind of combination between art and science, these two things that I was focused on in life, and that how meditation played a role in both, got me to seriously start practicing going on long-term retreats. As for what I've noticed in my own practice, I could tell you a lot of individual stories if you want, but if I had to sum it up, I would say it allows me to better differentiate what about my subjective conscious experience is a product or almost a rebuttal to the environment around me, and what is sort of some feeling of authenticity about who I am and what my intentions are for myself and the people around me and the world at large. So when I'm meditating, it's almost like a scientific inquisition. I am closing my eyes, or sometimes opening my eyes, but I'm taking a moment to gather observations about the very root of my conscious experience, and then forming theories and conclusions about what that is. I can give you an example. I was on a long-term retreat once, and I was walking along a path. There's you do like hours and hours of meditation, and then there's like a little break, and I was up in the mountains in British Columbia. It's beautiful, so I'm gonna go for a little walk. So I'm going for a quiet walk, and I had this moment where I was about to step on the path, and I looked down, and I was like this close to crushing an entire ant colony. And my body just immediately froze. I felt horrible. I was like, oh my God, I came so close to devastating a civilization. So I stepped over and I kept walking. And as I kept meditating for the days to come, this moment about the interaction between myself, my brain, and my body, and these ants, seeing these ants, and what about my body stopped me from stepping on? What made me not want to step on? It was almost pre-conscious, before I, or whatever my concept of self, decided what to do, my body was like, I don't want to kill these ants. So something in my body and my inherent self is compassionate to these ants for some reason, right? So these kind of reverberative insights that sort of distill self, brain, and mind into separate categories become an incredibly ripe ground for exploration about the nature of questions like that. So it's the rabbit hole goes deep.
Well, I think we're seeing more and more that brain technology at the consumer level, at the professional level, at the medical level is becoming somewhat ubiquitous in our culture and society, and more accepted that we have this ability with wearables to understand more about our physiology and our neurophysiology. One future vision that I have, that we have, is as we're able to better and better assess brain health, and again, doing that both the sleeping brain and the waking brain, because those two are both really important for brain health. Just like you now have a colonoscopy at age 50 or a mammogram at age 40, at a certain point in time, you're going to go to your physician, and as part of regular checkup, you're going to get a brain health profile that will include your sleep architecture and sleep study and a daytime assessment that'll probably stimulate some attention circuits and memory circuits. But I think brain health is going to become a critical part of your health profile. And if you have a history of Alzheimer's or another degenerative disease, you may go in earlier for your brain health profile. So I see that coming fairly soon. And the exciting thing is we have more and more tools now to change that brain state and improve your brain health at different stages of your life. Yeah, it's really fun.
It's fun.
I mean, it's really fun, it's really exciting, and you know, like I said, we've done a lot of work with high school students and college students and all branches of the military. And everybody enjoys seeing their own brain. And this is what got me into the field in the first place. The first time I got to see my brain activity and I saw that I could do something and change it, there's something really exciting about it. I guess, you know, it's just a knowledge of self that you don't normally have access to.
Yes.
How much sleep do adults need? Well, we know from population studies they need between 7 to 9 hours per night. Are adults getting this? By and large, no, they're not. In the 1960s, our mean modal sleep time was 8.5 hours per night, which is squarely between the 7 to 9 hours. Today, however, adults are getting between 6 to 7 hours as an average of a weekday. So that means that as a species, we've dropped our sleep time by about 20%, and as biologically, we haven't changed. So the issue arises, is sleep that important, or are we suffering the consequences? It is interesting that the body adapts in a way to lack of sleep to make you think that you're okay. And many leaders that I speak to think they're okay, but they're actually only sleeping 4 or 5 hours.
You have a big project, you have 20 people that you're directing. Initially, you're really excited, everything's going well. You go out and you party. You don't get as much sleep that night. When you come in, you're fatigued, front part of your brain is offline. Suddenly, that which you could manage, you can no longer manage. Because this area of the brain that will let you see the bigger picture isn't functioning as effectively. And then what happens, it's a stress response. And you begin to be angry, irritable, you begin to make rash decisions, because you don't have the brain structure, the brain circuits to be able to see the big picture.
People these days often feel like they can't say no to their boss, and they have to be around at 3 o'clock in the morning. I would encourage people to be more proactive and to have a conversation with their boss about why sleep is important. Why am I saying I can't take a call at 3 o'clock in the morning when it's just a routine conference call that we have every 2 weeks or every week, you know? Well, there's short-term effects, the cognitive impairment, and then we know that productivity goes down immediately and accuracy goes down immediately. So very next day, after a poor sleep, you're not going to be the effective worker you were the day before. So that's a really good economic argument to have with your boss. But we also know long-term, so it's not just short-term consequences that affect our working environment, but long-term consequences. We're more likely to be obese. We're twice as likely to have a heart attack when we age, twice as likely to have high blood pressure or to have a stroke. So we know those facts physically, but mentally, we're twice as likely to develop dementia, 3 times as likely to experience cognitive decline, and 5 times more likely to be depressed. Now, these are long-term effects. So if we're not impressed by the short-term effects, we should really be waking up to the long-term effects. And often we think that sleep is personal. Sleep is my business. If I choose not to sleep, then that's up to me. Now, yes and no. Yes, it is a personal thing. There's very intimate sleep. But what happens if you're the person driving my child's school bus, or you're the person driving the semi-trailer a long way? Or indeed, if you're the leader, if you're the Prime Minister of Australia or the President of America, making poor decisions because you haven't had enough time to sleep, it does become my business and it becomes everybody's business.
Modern medical science is now discovering that the gut influences the brain, and the gut influences the whole rest of the body. In the past, we thought that the gut or the digestive system just digests the foods and sends all the nutrients to the rest of the body, and everyone is happy. However, the latest discoveries show that the gut is a world into itself, in a way, because it contains millions, actually billions, of microorganisms, bacteria and other microorganisms. And these are not bad. A few of them can be bad or unhealthy, but most of them are necessary for the proper functioning of our digestive system. And these microorganisms in our gut release chemicals and hormones and factors that go through the digestive system into the blood and affect our brains and our immune systems, and our vascular systems and our whole body. So there's a whole world that we've never known before that exists right here.
It would seem important, or it would seem crucial for a leader to have a healthy brain. And from everything that we know today, the healthy brain doesn't exist in isolation, but it's very closely linked to a healthy gut. We know many things that influence the health at the gut level. We know many things that influence health of the brain-gut axis at the brain level. I would think that it's mandatory for any successful leader to pay attention to this concept and follow some of the recommendations that have come out of recent research and are strongly supported by science. So I think the recommendation is eat well based on very simple principles, and be mindful and train yourself to avoid negative emotions as much as you can. So with the emotional part, most people are not aware of that. So they think that, being angry or aggressive is necessarily a good thing for accomplishing a lot of things. But it's certainly not a good thing, because any negative emotion will always have a mirror image at the gut level, which is not positive.
One of the best things that leaders can do to manage their emotions, or two things I should say. One is consciously take on a perspective that makes them less subjected to the stress in a situation, and in feeling less stressed, reduce automatic responses. And the second thing that they can do is work on their self-awareness. If you recognize how you may automatically respond in particular situations, and how that maybe not be the most productive response will also help you, choose a response that will be more effective in getting the outcome that you're striving for.
The gut is about taking action. It's about boundary and threat. If you're under threat, your gut will feel it. It's the first place of fear and uncertainty. And it's about core identity, core visceral identity, who you truly are within yourself. And in fact, the gut brain controls immune function, which is self, not self function, and both as cellular level and at a metaphorical level. We have to take on board information, we have to digest it. You listen to the neurolinguistics of this. We need to digest that idea. And then someone says, no, that idea is not really me. And where they'll gesture is their gut when they say, it's not really me, it's not really us. I can't take that on board. I can't take action on that. So if you, from a change management perspective, if you can, you've got to engage the heart, you've got to enlighten the head, but you've got to empower the gut. You've got to bring people down into this gutsy courage to take action, to push through the status quo, to push through the fear. And when they do that, when they're aligned at this, compassion, creativity, courage, this heart, head, gut perspective, from a very important aspect, as you know, autonomic balance. The autonomic nervous system has to not be in fight or flight or not in rebound or freeze. When you come from this very coherent place, magic happens.
So movement can help leaders become better leaders in a way that they're not just being a leader from their mind. A lot of times we think that if we think we're good, we can be good, but unless the body believes it, it doesn't fully move through. So there's something about movement embodying the leadership, embodying what it feels like to have self-confidence. How do you feel confident in your feet, in your belly, in yourself, in your body? And then when you connect that to the mind, then it's a full experience, not just in your head. So for people who are in corporations, who are always in their head and always on their computer hunched up, like everything stops right there. So if they just start moving a little bit, and a lot of times I do very small movement for people, just learning how to move the shoulders, just learning how to move the head and releasing some of that stress. And by releasing some of that stress, they start to open new ways, new ways, new patterns, because we're made of patterns. We're habitual creatures. We do things over and over and we do the same thing. And so the stress just keeps repeating itself. So when you start to find a new pathway for your brain and your body, then your body starts to relax, and then you can start to embody the leadership characteristic more. You can start to lead from your heart, from your belly, from your feet, rather than just in your head.
In our modern cities, we find that it's not really designed for movement. We spend so much time in offices, in our own houses, and we spend so much time sitting. And our bodies were actually designed to move. And while we being sedentary, we're not offering our bodies the enrichment that comes through movement. One of the best ways to enrich the body through movement is by playing. Play is interesting because it does not provide an endpoint. We play not for any particular benefit, but for the pleasure of playing. And that by itself is the benefit. One of the ways I integrate play into my lifestyle is simply by visiting the beach, being in wide open spaces, seeing the natural environment, and seeing how I can move across it. It doesn't have to be anything very strict or a fitness regime, just simply hopping on a bar, balancing on a bar, moving around on the ground, and changing different levels. All these things provide so much enrichment for our own senses, for our own body, and fitness is actually a byproduct of playing. I decided to write a book in 2006, and in searching for a place of where to write this, I decided to go to Thailand, and there I had this miraculous opportunity to live in a cave while I'm writing my book. And while I was living in the cave, it was probably the height of my human experience. Not so much because it was so isolated, but because I felt the most alive when I was living in nature and so close to the natural patterns of nature. And it kind of gave perspective of how disconnected we've become from society and how disconnected we've become from our own bodies. Because in nature, you don't have the option of not using your body. You have to use all of your senses, you have to move, you have to be adaptable.
I believe when you bring your focus into your body, something happens with the brain. The brain kind of does not know what to do, and the brain tends to be able to focus only on one thing. Even people who multitask, they really multitask one thing at a time. And if you're guiding it to the body, somehow the brain just goes, oh, I don't need to do a lot. So the body kind of takes over, because our body holds so much more than we know. We hold stories, it holds, healing, it holds everything. And when we start moving it, that part of us takes over and the brain can just relax.
This disconnection from our bodies can be measured scientifically, and it's what we call vagal tone. Vagal tone is the strength of communication between our brain and our body. And when we find low vagal tone, we find there's a lot of illness, both mental, physical, and physiological. It's actually a risk indicator for both cardiovascular diseases and mental conditions. When we find that we have very high vagal tone, there's very strong communication between brain and body, and this is the perfect integration between our autonomic nervous system, which is all the processes that happen in the body by itself, and our central nervous system. Our bodies only function under two states. One is the parasympathetic state, which is rest and restorative, and the other state is the sympathetic state, which is governed by fear, and it is our fight or flight mode. So it is not an optimal state for our nervous system. It is really meant to be a short duration state. But in today's world, this state is becoming more and more prevalent and has almost become a default state. It's become a new baseline. The parasympathetic state, however, is becoming more and more rare. It's the state when we are calm and relaxed, and ultimately, in the parasympathetic state, all of our organ systems are under homeostasis, in a complete state of balance. And this internal harmony is what shapes our thought patterns as well. So when we are in fear, all of our thought processes become very goal-driven and linear. And this form of thinking is what works poorly under uncertainty. While when we are in a parasympathetic state, we find that the safety that is in the body, the security that we feel, allows us to think expansively and creatively. And this is precisely what works best under uncertainty.
These days, something like the global financial crisis happens, one day, and then the next day it's down here in this part of the world. So that speed has meant that as leaders, one has to be able to change rapidly, pivot, change direction. Your whole fundamentals can really change extremely quickly. One has to be a much, much more empathetic leader, because the average person that's working for you is also having to experience and interpret that change much more rapidly than they ever used to. In the past, they were given a business plan, they were given incentives, they saw the market, and they went out there and executed. Now, all of that can change in a matter of weeks. And so helping lead people through that kind of change is a kind of new skill that we all have to develop as leaders and practice much more than we ever used to.
One of the ironies to me about how the heart is perceived in modern culture nearly everywhere in the world is that high-performance athletes, giant rugby players, giant American football players, people that are massive, like human giants, if they win a game, one of the things their manager or their coach is probably going to say is, "My guys played with so much heart. I love my guys." Our guys stick together. We just know we love each other, and we're going to do everything we can to make things work. When was the last time you heard a CEO after a great quarterly results? Guy, our team played with so much heart. It's crazy to me that people that are fed performance-enhancing drugs, perhaps, and totally testosterone-driven people have no problem acknowledging the role the heart is playing in their high performance and their ability to work together as a team and in organizations. Careful, don't use the word heart, don't use care, don't use love, for God's sakes, because that's somehow believed to be soft. How is it strong over here and soft over here? Crazy. The heart's a pump. Don't use it in work. It'll get you in trouble. You'll make weak decisions. It's an old paradigm. It's been known now for at least 30 years that these changing rhythmic patterns of the heart, which correlate with changing emotional states, stressful patterns being the more chaotic-looking rhythms of the heart, peaceful or loving emotions causing a smooth, synchronized pattern of the heart, that signal goes everywhere, including the brain. And so 2 terms were coined back in the 70s. When the heart is in this beautiful, smooth, coherent pattern, and those energies sent to the brain, what results in the cortex is called cortical facilitation. The functioning, the processing of the cortex is enhanced. Reaction speeds are improved. Thinking through what we want to say is enhanced. Finding lost keys, those kinds of things enhanced. When the patterns are the chaotic, almost earthquake-looking patterns associated with stress, those signals are also being sent to the brain. The result in the cortex was named cortical inhibition, which makes sense. You think about those times when you're highly frustrated, highly angry, associated with these chaotic rhythms of the heart. That noise, if you will, is being sent to the higher cortex, and therefore your ability to make a good decision or think clearly about a decision or a communication you're needing to make is often compromised. And then we have to pay the price for a bad decision in terms of more stress, keeping us stuck in that loop.
I think that our society is sorely lacking compassion, especially in leadership roles where it's of critical importance. And I think compassion is more than empathy. Sometimes people conflate the two. And empathy is just this idea that I see someone who's hurt and I can feel their pain and understand their pain. But compassion is sort of a radical act in our society. It's this ability to step out of our shell, step out of our self-involved ego and really try to work to help other people. And it's just, I can't even, with recent changes in the political spectrum, which I'm very engaged with, it's just very clear to me that a compassionate society and a mindful society would be a huge step for us. A lot of the problems that come out of our systems of media, our systems of government, our capitalist systems, our systems of attention, our food system, our healthcare system, our education system come from decisions that are made without compassion.
Appreciation is one of the most powerful tools a leader can use. Appreciation is free energy. Anything that we appreciate grows in value. That includes the people that are part of your organization. That includes your customers. That includes your community. I think simply making time for the expression of genuine appreciation and genuine concern for another human being, I think that's hugely valuable. That's as much as a hug. I have found that when I can, especially as a leader, when I can stop whatever's been going on in my mind, all the issues that I'm dealing with that day, and just listen genuinely to the needs of someone who is, quote, my subordinate, and they feel heard, that's the best hug they've had in the past year, even if I don't even shake their hand, because they feel acknowledged at a deep human level. So I understand some places hugging is not cool. I'm going to break that down as fast as I can, because I believe we're missing a lot, and we're strangling ourselves in this self-protectionism that's not helping. It's not creating more bonding. It's not creating more creativity, more collaboration. It's keeping us separate. Why is that good?
Thinking about the last few decades and what's changed in the world of work and how I've experienced it and what I see, I think when I started out, for sure, everything was less complex in many ways. It was relatively clear what you had to do, and it was very much manager-led. in terms of you took instructions, you did what you were asked. There wasn't a lot of opportunity to put forward your own ideas or innovate. And there was a lot of respect, I'd have to say. Respect for the managers, even respect for politicians. There was respect for professionals like doctors and lawyers and so on. And over that time, the sort of people view of the world has changed in terms of how they want to be led and how they see being led. Some of the latest thinking in areas like neuroscience are very powerful to bring skeptical leaders, boards, CEOs, to bring them over the line, and particularly finance directors, for example, who want to know that there is a direct correlation between a spend and a return.
I think it's very important for leaders to understand how the brain works, how it regulates your emotions, how it regulates your reactions to situations, because the truth is you can't set yourself up these days in perfectly controlled experiments. Your brain is interpreting such a different set of signals, such a different set of contexts all the time in business now, and especially with the speed of change and the volatility of change, your brain has to be your friend in managing all of this. And I think that at the end of the day too, if you're going to be a real leader, if you're going to help other people through that change, you have to help them figure that out with their brain as well, and help them figure out what are the signals and triggers that they're receiving that are causing them to behave in a particular way, and say, have you tried looking at it differently? Have you thought about that particular action tends to kind of trigger a particular emotion in you, and let's stop and interpret that before you go and act. And I think that's, candidly, as a leader, one of your big responsibilities when there's so much volatility, there's so much speed, there's so much change, is help the people that you work with, you know, their brain, which is their most valuable organ, if you like, in leadership, developing themselves.
This is a very good question. Are leaders born or are they made? And I think the answer is that both are true. We're born into this world with certain talents, with certain strengths. Our brain is wired in such a way that we see the brain in a certain way. We're comfortable acting in a certain way. But then it's made, it's opportunities. Because what the opportunities are doing are bringing out specific talents. It's an important question if experience can change the brain. And the bottom line is yes, your brain is a river and not a rock. This brain is pretty concrete. This brain is etched in stone. But our brain, 70% of the connections of our brain change every day. Every day. And so this is the value of taking additional courses. This is the value of ongoing experience. This is the value of transcendental meditation.
So I believe that right now it's really vital and crucial if every organisation, if schools and across the planet, if we just started to learn the very simple, easy breathing practices, the focus at the heart level through kindness and compassion, and breathing that up to creativity, directionalising the gutsy courage to take action. And if every decision in every day, from the minute you woke up to the minute you went to sleep, you just asked yourself, what was most compassionate, creative and courageous me that I could be and do now as I lead my own life and my relationships with others, the world would change. And we could change it in less than a generation. And we need to, because the world is right now at a point of massive change, of exponential change. And right now is when we can make that change. So I think the time is now to shift leadership on the planet.
In the past, managers, as you know, used to be foremen giving instructions, and now we need another kind of leaders. We need creators leading another leaders to create themselves, which is fascinating, is amazing. It's a lot of opportunities, a new world, but we need more empowerment in our people.
As a leader, we need to consider this change in the world and the change in the expectations. And whilst command and control may have worked once upon a time, it doesn't work anymore. We know that we can get more productivity out of people if they have higher levels of well-being, if they're working at their best.
Mindful leadership is, I think, the rarest commodity, because when I hear the phrase mindful leadership, I think about leadership without ego. And that concept works on a lot of different levels, right? Of course, there's this idea that you're in a room making decisions and there's a team around you of experts usually who are experts that are, specialists in fields that you as a leader might not be a specialist in. And your ability to truly listen to their perspective without feeling like I'm right and they're wrong is definitely the first example of mindful leadership without ego. But of course, the larger perspective is that leaders in our society, in government, education, healthcare, and business, are responsible for major decisions that affect millions and even billions of lives. So being able to do that without ego is of critical importance. So mindfulness, I think, is a direct access to experiencing the world without this narrow perspective of myself and my own needs and my own desires and my own desire to be right and my own desire to be successful, but also the ability to perceive with focus and concentration, which helps general productivity, the ability to make decisions under stress, which are all attributes that we want our leaders to have.
Thinking about my children coming through into the business world, thinking about organizations and how to get the most from people. To me, the one wish is that people look at their colleagues, their employees, their managers, their teams, through the lens of, potential. To me, that's kind of the most important thing. If you see potential in people, and you help them see the potential in themselves, chances are they'll reach it.
Creating this documentary has been one of the most rewarding and exciting projects of my life. Never before have I seen so much knowledge and so many tools available to understand the potential of our brains. Being more mindful and inspirational as people, helping others grow, and changing our brains is within our reach. I am convinced that building better societies starts with each of us learning how to become better leaders.